When the entire media world exploded in a horrific earthquake this morning, Hollywood had still not recovered from the scandals at the beginning of the year. According to reports, Rick Harrison, the well-known face of the popular reality show Porn Stars, killed himself while incarcerated. The word got out quickly. Headlines were published by major news outlets. Forums erupted in debate as fans were perplexed. The manner of death, however, was what gave many even more chills. In an isolated cell, a tiny paring knife was discovered bleeding next to the body. Nobody could have predicted that the man, who had formerly been regarded as the spirit of porn stars, would die in such a terrible way. He had a deep voice, keen eyes, and a self-assured half-smile. Social media is still sharing Rick's final photos prior to his arrest. He appeared to be anything but a sign of tragedy, as he sat behind a counter chewing gum and writing his name in red ink on an antique. However, it all came to an end after only a few weeks of detention. Rick Harrison, what happened to him? What made a guy who had been at the height of his glory wind himself behind bars and then crumble in isolation? The Federal Bureau of Investigation initially said that Rick had been arrested in relation to an illegal antiques ring. For more than a year, the FBI had been surreptitiously watching. The dubious dealings were uncovered behind the scenes of a television program, when numerous antiquities valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars were removed through the use of intricate deceptions. News of his death in his prison cell broke before the public had a chance to develop an opinion. There have only been a few chilly words in the early morning news, no press conference, and no official conclusion. At 4:17 a.m., the victim's body was found. Suicide has not been ruled out by the investigating agency. But was this a staged spectacle to conceal something much deeper? Or was this indeed a suicide? A number of questions are being posed by fans, reporters, and even specialists. Rick showed indications of being followed, threatened, and unusually isolated since entering the institution. According to some anonymous prison staff, some believe he is going to make a revelation that might upend the entire structure used to control antique collectors. Is Rick being used as a pawn by a hidden group that controls the million-dollar auctions, and they take action to suppress him when he starts to pose a threat? It is also impossible to overlook Rick's shady connections with influential politicians and business people, who frequently visited the gold and silver pawn shop to exchange items that couldn't be invoiced in addition to purchasing antiquities. A witness once claimed to have seen a well-known senator leave the store through the rear door in the middle of the night. This claim has never been fully looked into. Another argument that chills individuals is this one. Why could something like a paring knife enter a cell in a highly secured jail facility? It was brought in by whom? What caused the security camera to malfunction for 13 minutes during that period? All of them are turning into parts of a conspiracy-filled picture. Rick's relatives said nothing. One of Porn Star's primary characters, son Corey Harrison, just posted a brief status update on his personal page. Not my father. For fans to believe that this story cannot be resolved with a straightforward suicide conclusion, he never gave up enough. The media is rushing to rerun previous episodes, scrutinizing Rick's every move and expression in the most recent seasons in search of odd clues or unspoken signals. In the 97th episode, Rick may have even left a clue according to some bloggers. Everyone has a secret. The problem is, who dares to keep it to the end? He whispered as he calmly gazed at a statue of a pharaoh. Could it be that Rick harbored a secret greater than any antique he ever appreciated? Then, between the cold steel gates, the question continues to reverberate. Was it Rick Harrison who committed suicide? Or was he the victim of a violent game where the truth was twisted by some force? The solution might stay hidden indefinitely, or wait to be revealed by someone courageous and resilient enough to carry out the investigation. Because the truth is the most valuable and hardest item to purchase in the world of antiques, where everything has a cost. A nationally renowned figure, Rick Harrison stood between the hazy boundaries of reality TV and the actual world, where the truth was constantly exaggerated, altered, or concealed behind every image, until he made headlines with the news of his suicide in prison. Nobody anticipated, however, that the path from pawnbroker to the height of celebrity could culminate in such a startling demise. Born in North Carolina in 1965 and brought up in a middle-class household, Rick Harrison began his career at a young age. In 1989, he and his father, Richard Oldman Harrison, opened the gold and silver pawn business in Las Vegas after he left school in the 10th grade. Originally a tiny wayside shop, Rick swiftly transformed it into an intriguing location where people came to exchange goods and hear historical tales, thanks to his astute observations and half-joking style of speech. The incident that, the debut of Porn Stars on the History Channel in 2009, marked a turning point in Rick's life. Unexpectedly, the show created a sensation with its straightforward approach, which documented the process of negotiating, evaluating, and purchasing and selling antiques at the shop. Every week, Rick, his father, son Corey, and closest buddy Chumley captivated millions of spectators. Porn Stars were so captivating, not only because of their unusual, expensive, or rare stuff, but also because of Rick's clever, sophisticated, and occasionally not totally innocent storytelling style. In surprising ways, Rick Harrison gradually rose to the top of reality TV. He met politicians, published books, opened restaurants, went on major talk shows, and even received a nomination for the Nevada State Legislature. But behind the bright lights, nobody realized that Rick was engaged in a game of power and secrecy that was more risky than any negotiation that was shown on television. The lavish existence started to show tiny, subtle, and easily missed flaws. First, there were claims that some of the objects on Porn Stars were either stolen from private collectors or museums, or worse, lacked legal documentation. Rick was frequently spotted at private auctions for the wealthy, but he never spoke out. Although a video clip of him evaluating an artwork, thought to have been lost during World War II, was leaked, the painting was never included on the program. In addition, there were the covert relationships with dangerous artists, playboys, and tycoons. Through the sale of antiques at Rick's store, a musician who had been arrested for money laundering claimed to have laundered almost $500. The FBI started to monitor him in spite of the lack of hard evidence. Numerous bank accounts connected to Rick's business were examined. The accusations of financial fraud, money laundering, and unlawful asset possession were then dropped like a time bomb. In late February, Rick was taken into custody in a covert, unannounced operation. A black car arrived at the business and carried him away as if he didn't exist. No handcuffs, no press. Only a few days later, when information from the police leaked, did the media learn about the story. His body was then found in his cell a month later. The worst aspect of this tale, however, was his last days inside bars. According to insiders, Rick was put in solitary confinement, a setting designated for vulnerable inmates who run the danger of being assaulted or attacked. He needed to be shielded from other inmates because he was well known. The odd thing is that Rick's lawyers were not notified, and he did not request it. According to nearby prisoners, Rick hardly ever talked, never visited the playground, and never interacted with anyone. He occasionally mumbled to himself while sitting for hours staring at the wall and writing with dried blood, as if he lived in a different reality. Rick was once taken for a psychological evaluation for evidence of minor psychosis and severe depression, according to a jail medical staff member, but he was discharged without any help. A man wearing a prison uniform was seen entering Rick's room for 7 minutes the night before he passed away. This time frame matched the cell camera's data gap. The man's identity was unknown, and there were no visits noted in the prison's records at the time. Investigators were perplexed by the fact that the knife discovered in the room did not correspond with any of the goods provided or kept in the jail storage. Furthermore, why would Rick use a paring knife, a weapon that is difficult to conceal and would quickly raise suspicions, to cut his wrists in such a lengthy and agonizing manner if he truly planned to terminate his own life? Beneath the sleeping pad, a solitary scribbled phrase that read, "I have nothing left to hold." Is it a coded message or a last joke? No one thought the line had no meaning for Rick Harrison, who made narrative an art form. The more you go into the story, the more intriguing it becomes. According to some online conspiracy theories, Rick is collaborating with the government to uncover a global antiquities trafficking ring, a murky enterprise that has branches throughout Europe and the Middle East, and deals in goods from conflict areas. There are no public photos of Rick's excursions to Israel or Iraq, despite some people pointing out that he went there at a collector's personal invitation. It's also possible that Rick handled banned objects, items that were thought to be cursed that were shown in some episodes, but were later taken out. Some recall the 17th century incident with the cursed ring. Rick Harrison, who had been in the glare of the camera, now vanished into the deepest depths of the prison. After trying it on and saying the enigmatic words, "Some things should not be judged by their price." However, nobody is certain that this was a suicide. Therefore, the question still stands. Until the very end, nobody truly knows what Rick concealed. Perhaps someone is attempting to keep us in the dark. Due to the haunting past and public pressure, Rick, the former CFO of the Gold and Silver Corporation, committed suicide 1 month after the fatal night in the freezing cell of the Central Prison. When all official information had come to a straightforward conclusion, a report from an internal probe was surreptitiously released. A feature in it startled the system as a whole. The prison had no control over the dagger used in the incident. No indication that Rick had concealed it himself. Actually, according to the cell inspection schedule, his section had been off-limits for the preceding 48 hours. The strangeness didn't end there. At the very moment of the occurrence, the security camera system, which was routinely inspected every 24 hours, unintentionally malfunctioned. All of the data from 2342 to 215 could not be recovered due to the corruption of the recording. Although the technical study indicated that no other parts of the institution were impacted, the report cited a local power outage as the cause. It wasn't a coincidence anymore. It served as a warning. Deeply and expertly, some invisible hand was at work. Scholars started to move. At Gold and Silver, a company with significant sway over public funding, defense contracts, and cross-border investment initiatives, Rick had played a pivotal role. He was the sole owner of the Omega Files, a collection of records said to include all the specifics of international money laundering, underground transactions, and even slush funds used to finance nefarious political campaigns. Many thought Rick was getting ready to reveal a number of prominent government figures who had soiled their hands with him, and many would not allow him to survive if that were the case. Rick was sent to a special isolation chamber in the jail hospital after he miraculously survived a deep wrist slash that went all the way to his artery. He was silent for 3 weeks. He had considerable psychological trauma, according to the doctor's diagnosis. However, there was a profound anxiety and a smothering repressed rage in those eyes that were constantly fixed on the chilly ceiling. Then, unexpectedly, he requested to see a reporter. Rick sat up straight beneath a white hospital blanket, his face haggard, his parched lips twitching, his eyes bloodshot. He said just one sentence during the less than 1-minute meeting. "Someone wants me to vanish, but I don't want to die." The headlines of numerous newspapers featured those 7 words, which were spoken in a shaky voice and with a horse's voice. The public's perception was shattered. There was a surge of distrust. Who was it that Rick was talking about? Why did he abruptly insist on meeting with the media and then promptly deny any more communication? More significantly, what secret did he possess that required someone to keep him silent at any costs? As the authorities attempted to calm, according to public opinion, anonymous emails without a sender's address or signature started to arrive in the inbox of Ellie Nguyen, an independent investigative reporter who was the first to obtain access to the audio of Rick's statements. They simply included brief messages with files attached. A 17-second video footage of a man wearing a security uniform entering Rick's cell. The night of the event was included in one of them. He put something fervently under his pillow in the gloom. Then he glanced up at the camera, gave it a small smile, and leaned over to unplug it. This was not a suicide, Ellie knew. The assassination attempt was unsuccessful. Additionally, the perpetrator has sufficient authority to control every aspect of the system, including the media, investigative committees, and prisons. Rick left the hospital 2 days later. Where he went, how he got away, and why none of the security guards were charged are all unknown. The only thing on his hospital bed was a crumpled piece of paper that had been hurriedly written in blue ink soiled by water. "I have remained silent long enough. You'll have to pay attention to me this time." Rick's initial declaration of war was only one line on that piece of paper. A man who had been buried alive by lies and power is now rising again like a storm from underground. And those who had given the order to kill him were beginning to shudder somewhere in the shadows. A total of 25 victims were discovered, each positioned as if in a perverse ritual. Clear indications of trauma, extensive cuts, blunt force injuries, and in multiple instances, chemical evidence suggesting poisoning were observed by forensic specialists. These were not haphazard or unplanned murders. They were meticulously planned, carried out, and staged to stay undetected for as long as possible. The location of the bodies further unsettled detectives. Many of them were in spaces Harrison used on a regular basis, including a library, a private study, and even a room next to his own gym. This brought up some very troubling issues. Had he been cohabitating with his victims? Was this closeness deliberate, a show of power, or some hideous psychological rite? According to the evidence, he may have been revisiting the bodies in addition to concealing them. maybe utilizing their presence as a means of silent control or introspection. The victims' identities varied as much as the ways in which they were concealed. Some were connected to associates on the black market and known criminal links. A rival dealer, a private courier, a disgruntled appraiser, and others had tenuous or murky connections to Harrison's corporate empire. Investigators were left to speculate as to whether their deaths were the result of errors, experiments, or collateral damage, because some of them had no known relationship to him at all. The fact that none of the deaths were unintentional was evident. Each was the outcome of conscious activity, motivated by a well-considered goal. If you were impacted by this story, please remember to like, share, and comment with your opinions. Get more unseen stories and real-life drama about your favorite TV personalities by subscribing. Once a testament to Rick Harrison's success, the mansion itself has devolved into a falsehood. Originally thought to contain precious antiques, crates were discovered to contain smuggled goods, unrecorded treasures, objects taken from areas devastated by conflict, and, in one instance, human remains preserved in resin. The house had become a cover for deleting lives and trading in history. Unlicensed acquisitions and tax fraud were no longer the issue. This was a complex network of international criminal activity, conspiracy, and murder. A man who had once been regarded as a pleasant, knowledgeable, man oversaw all operations. The same Rick Harrison who taught viewers about American history on national television had been leading a parallel life in which he gathered power over life and death, in addition to artifacts. The country was taken aback. The headlines never stopped. How could a guy so well known and adored have planned such a nightmare for so long without drawing attention to himself? His public persona, his painstaking attention to detail, and the appearance of openness that comes with celebrity were the answers. Rick Harrison had meticulously created a world where nobody questioned him, not even his closest friends and family, his business associates, or his admirers. And he concealed a room of horrors behind that world's smooth exterior that would take years to completely reveal. This case involved more than just murder. It was the total collapse of a public figure who had represented the American dream for years, known throughout the world as the witty, informed star of porn stars. Rick Harrison had won people over with his knowledge of antiques, his sardonic humor, and his on-screen connection with his father and son. He was more than just a businessman to millions. He represented achievement via diligence and integrity. However, beneath the meticulously constructed facade lay a guy living a much more sinister life, one carefully concealed under the bright lights of a reality TV set and the glass counters of a pawn shop. A normal examination into financial irregularities, ledger anomalies, weird transactions, and mysterious shipments coming into and going out of the gold and silver pawn shop marked the beginning of the unraveling. However, even the most experienced investigators were taken aback by what the FBI discovered when they removed the layers. Agents found secret rooms within Harrison's expansive Las Vegas mansion that weren't marked on any plans. Some completely locked off, while others pretended to be storage or closets. Behind these walls were the horrifying remains of 25 people, each expertly positioned. Forensic teams gradually put together who they were. We appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave your own comments. Let's return to the story from today. They weren't just any victims. Many had a direct connection to Harrison's illegal activities, were either participants in black market transactions or underground trading, or had threatened to reveal his network. Some were thought to have attempted blackmail, while some had collaborated with him and others had betrayed him. Harrison's protracted game of control and concealment involved each death as a calculated play, and each body as a message. These were not impulsive crimes. They were deliberate exclusions. The horror was only heightened by digital evidence. Federal cybercrime units laboriously deciphered encrypted messages, exposing a man who was not just culpable, but also at the heart of a massive global criminal network. Harrison wasn't only letting stolen merchandise run through his store. He was arranging cross-border transactions, directing the flow of stolen antiquities and looted objects, and laundering money via what the general public thought was a respectable enterprise. He was depicted issuing commands, setting up meetings, and even talking about targets who were starting to cause trouble in several messages. A sealed area deep within the mansion, a kind of shrine, yielded one of the most terrifying discoveries. The victim's personal things, watches, necklaces, pictures, and occasionally clothing items were found inside. Harrison kept thorough records on shelves that detailed his observations of individuals, including victims, in addition to money transactions. Some records, which noted habits, potential threats, and whether someone had outlived their usefulness. Read like inventories. While others verged on obsession, the resulting psychological image showed a man who was obsessed with power and control. Someone who viewed people as assets or challenges rather than as unique persons. As he did with antiquities, he gathered their lives, cataloged, stored, and eventually threw away. We appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave your own comments. Let's return to the story from today. A total of 25 victims were discovered, each positioned as if in a perverse ritual. Clear indications of trauma, extensive cuts, blunt force injuries, and in multiple instances, chemical evidence suggesting poisoning were observed by forensic specialists. These were not haphazard or unplanned murders. They were meticulously planned, carried out, and staged to stay undetected for as long as possible. The location of the bodies further unsettled detectives. Many of them were in spaces Harrison used on a regular basis, including a library, a private study, and even a room next to his own gym. This brought up some very troubling issues. Had he been cohabitating with his victims? Was this closeness deliberate, a show of power, or some hideous psychological rite? According to the evidence, he might have been doing more than just concealing the dead, going over them again, perhaps employing their presence as a means of introspection or silent control. The victims' identities varied as much as the ways in which they were concealed. Some were connected to associates on the black market and known criminal links, a rival dealer, a private courier, a disgruntled appraiser, and others had tenuous or murky connections to Harrison's corporate empire. Investigators were left to speculate as to whether their deaths were the result of errors, experiments, or collateral damage, because some of them had no known relationship to him at all. The fact that none of the deaths were unintentional was evident. Each was the outcome of conscious activity motivated by a well-considered goal. If you were impacted by this story, please remember to like, share, and comment with your opinions. Get more unseen stories and real-life drama about your favorite TV personalities by subscribing.